What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Saturday Standouts. As always, with me is my co-host Ethan Carbone, and then a special guest joining us tonight, Matt Skura, another member of the Unwrapped Sports Network, one of our best contributors over there. How are you guys doing tonight? Let's start with Ethan. How are you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing good, man. Excited to wind up these win totals for the conferences. SEC's our last conference that we're gonna be going through before seasons start getting underway. Week 0 is coming up in about a week or so that's exciting. But looking forward to it. Football is right around the corner, guys. I'm pumped. And Matt, how are you, brother?
Well, I'm doing great. It's always good to be talking about college football. Like you mentioned, Caleb, it's always around the corner. Week 0 coming up soon. Definitely going to be some big games to look forward to week 1. Just excited about that. And I'm also excited to be back on Saturday Standouts. It's been a while since I've been on here, and I'm excited to talk some college football.
Yes, sir. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to be going over, like I mentioned earlier, SEC preview and win totals. Sorry, guys, got a bit of a cold going on. So if I'm coughing or whatever, I'll try and mute myself. But SEC win totals. So we're going to be going SEC East. Then in the SEC West, SEC, a bunch of things are going to be changing with them. Most likely heading here into the future with the possibility of Oklahoma and Texas moving into the conference and super conference possibly becoming a thing. But that's not happening yet, so we're just going to stick with the SEC teams we know now. And with that being said, we're just going to jump into it, guys. First off, we got the SEC East, and we'll start off with the Florida Gators. Ethan, go ahead, take it away for us.
All right, starting off, over-under of 9 even, and the under, -125. Very interesting team, this Florida team. Dan Mullen, me, Matt, and Caleb were talking before the show. He's screwed if Florida doesn't get the over here or at least hit 9 wins. I kind of agree with you, Matt, in the fact that Mullen's fired if this Florida team doesn't succeed. And this Florida team rides on or dies on Emory Jones's back. I'm not sure how they're going to do because looking at their schedule, they have a relatively easy non-conference schedule starting off Florida Atlantic, USF. Then throughout the year, they have Samford, and then they have Florida State. Florida State could be a tough rivalry game, but this Florida State team's not looking great, so they should be able to go 4-0 in conference play. And then throughout the season, I only really see Bama and Georgia as their 2 main losses, potentially Missouri as well. What about you guys?
Definitely some great points there. I, too, agree with you as well, Ethan. The over-under is at 9. I feel like Dan Mullins has to reach 9, especially with the embarrassment that happened last year. I mean, you look at Florida, they had some bad losses. Like I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they beat Georgia last year in the Florida-Georgia game, right? If I'm not mistaken. So that was kind of like their high ride going in, but they suffered one of the terrible losses. They were a 6 seed going up against a heavily injured LSU team at home in Gainesville, and you drop that game. That game was unacceptable to lose because if you look at if Florida would have won that game, they could have maybe snuck in at number 4 instead of Notre Dame at number 4. But because Florida had that bad loss, and then on top of that, lose to Bama in the SEC championship game, you have 3 losses. You're not getting in as a 4 seed with 3 losses. Maybe you can make a case with 2, but it's very hard to make a case with 2 losses again, especially when you have that bad of a loss. That's why this year it's so important for Dan Mullins to reach that 9-win mark, because if he doesn't, I mean, he's under. If we're being honest here, with this University of Florida squad that he's had, he's underperformed a lot. Like Dan Mullins, when he arrived at the University of Florida, he's obviously turned them around, because before he got there, they were in a bit of a slump. Like they weren't like they were when it was with Tebow and Meyer, like in like a championship conversation, top 10 conversation. They weren't like that. But once Dan Mullins got there, they kind of turned it around a little bit, turned into more of like that top 10 Florida team that we would see, not really like a championship contender like in the past, but a team that you could see to where, hey, this team could maybe make a New Year's Six bowl. They could be in like those big name bowl games now. Well, now you look at, and with college is different, and especially when you're at a big program like Florida, if you're a head coach, you got 3-4 years to prove yourself. And if you don't prove yourself, you're out the door. And Dan Mullen in his tenure in Florida, he's got some good wins. He's got some good records. But when is he going to get over that hump to get to the college football playoff because now it's 4 teams. Could expand in the future, but for right now it's at 4. And you look at Dan Mullen's schedule and the University of Florida schedule, 9 wins is easily doable. But it's all like you mentioned, Ethan, all on the back of Emory Jones. Emory Jones has to perform well. He has to do good, and that also relies on the head coach. It's different in college. In the pros, you don't really need the head coach. If the quarterback is great, he could lead the team without him. But in college, they heavily rely on the head coach to develop said quarterback. And you look at their schedule, Ethan's right. You only have 2, maybe 3 tough games that you got to play against. You got the game against Bama, but it's home at Gainesville. And then you look at another game that you got the annual Florida-Georgia game in Jacksonville. And another game that I'd even possibly throw in there that could be a tough game, I would say, would be Saturday, October 16th, when they got to play LSU in Death Valley. That's gonna be a tough game, man. I mean, we look at LSU last 2 years they played Florida. LSU's had their number last 2 years, whether it be when it was Joe Burrow and the crew and they won the national championship where they picked them apart, or what happened last year when Florida was just flat out embarrassed by a injury-prone LSU team. You know, it's going to be a different Florida team because a lot of players have left. You don't have Kyle Trask anymore. You don't have Kyle Pitts, 2 of the main stars on offense. So it'll be interesting to see how well Florida does this season. But looking at the win total at 9 games, I feel like it's an easy reach to get 9 games. And if you don't, I think we could all pretty much agree if somehow, some way, Florida only wins 8 games, Dan Mullen's going to be out the door.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. A lot of this hinges on how, Emory Jones ends up playing the quarterback position. There's been some positive things and negative things coming out of their camp on, how he's performing this far over summer heading into the fall. So it's a big question mark surrounding him. He's obviously not going to be Kyle Trask. He's not going to be as accurate with the ball. I'm not going to be able to push it down the field as much as Kyle Trask was, especially with the weapons that Trask had. You look at the guys that they lost on the offense, not only in Kyle Pitts, but Kadarius Toney and Trevon Grimes are both gone as well. They do get Jacob Copeland back, who's their leading returning receiver, but somebody's going to have to step up outside of them. They do have a very pretty, good-looking running back room there with Clemson transfer DeMarcus Bowman and Lorenzo Lingard, who was coming over from Miami at some point. And then their defense has a little bit of question marks too. They're only returning 4 starters on that side of the ball. So they're going to have to fill in a lot of pieces here on both sides of the football. And I don't know, it's not easy to do in college unless you're, Alabama or Ohio State to be able to do that year in, year out and just replace guys that leave. Florida, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. We haven't necessarily seen Dan Mullen have to do that yet. So sitting here at nine games, I think they go under. They do have tough games. You talked about it, Bama, at LSU, Georgia, and then you could maybe even throw in, a Kentucky or Florida State game that might be a little bit difficult for them as well. Maybe even Tennessee. It's always a good one too. But like you said, Matt, if this is not a good season for Dan Mullen, his name has already been in the hot seat. The fans have already been out after him. So keep an eye on Dan Mullen's name, depending on how their season goes the rest of the year. But I'm going to lean here to under 9 wins for Florida this year.
I'm probably going to go the over. I'll put my trust in Emory Jones until he loses it, just because I'm not going to be someone that hates on him right away. I haven't seen him play. We'll see what he can do.
Yeah, I agree with Ethan as well. I'm leaning more towards the over. Like, I honestly feel like for Florida, they're going to be 9 or 10 wins. I don't see this team going under. If they do somehow go under, if there would be a 4th loss, I wouldn't be shocked if somehow, some way, Florida State, Caleb's favorite team, former alum at FSU, just goes into Gainesville, just plays spoiler. That would be the only way how I could see them losing that 4th game. But that would just be one of those, if all things go bad for Florida. That means if Emory Jones doesn't perform well, if the returning players just don't do well, and if Dan Mullins just doesn't get the team together. But I would say over 9 wins, you could pretty much book it, but don't be shocked if they ride right at 9 wins.
Yeah. And then our next team here in the SEC East, the proverbial favorite amongst everybody who talks and speaks college football, is the Georgia Bulldogs, coming in here at over or under 10.5 games. They have to start the year off, obviously, with the Clemson Tigers. They face UAB and Charleston Southern, as well as Georgia Tech out of conference. But looking at that, outside of those, games that are non-conference games, play South Carolina at home, at Vanderbilt, at home against Arkansas, have to go to Auburn, at home against Kentucky. Obviously, that Florida game in Jacksonville, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Home again for Missouri, head to Tennessee. What are your guys' thoughts on the over/under 10.5 there for the Georgia Bulldogs? And what are we looking like in JT Daniels, probably first full season as their starting quarterback?
Well, starting off, you have a banged-up defense, and then you have an even more banged-up wide receiver room. With earlier today, it was being announced by Josh Pate, Darnell Washington and Tyke Smith are expected to miss 3 to 4 weeks. You have George Pickens out for the season. And then you have, what the hell is happening with Eric Gilbert? That's the question I want answered. What the hell is going on there? He's homesick at LSU. Transfer. I want to be closer to home. JUCO. Wait, I want Florida. Actually, I'll go to Georgia. All right, I'm away from the team now. What's going on there? No one knows if Eric Gilbert's going to even play college football. I'm confused. Matt, anything?
Yeah, I look at Georgia. I look at their schedule that they have. I think depending on how they play against Clemson, that will set the tone the whole season. And the one thing I always hate to say is Georgia sports always find a way to let you down. You look at football, NFL-wise, we obviously know what goes on with the Falcons. Braves last year doing a 3-1 choke job against the Dodgers. And then you look at the Georgia Bulldogs. They've had ample opportunity the last couple of years to maybe make that college football push, but they always have that one bad loss. Remember the one bad loss they had against South Carolina at home when our boy Rodrigo Blankenship shanked one to the right. And then you look at what happened last year as well. They won a bowl game, but they had an opportunity to get in the top 4. And they just simply couldn't get the job done. You look at how Georgia's schedule is slated this year, I will say is very favorable. Mm-hmm. Besides the opening game against Clemson, your next toughest game isn't until close to November, which would be, like Caleb mentioned, October 30th, the greatest outdoor cocktail game in the world when they play Florida. And then if they win the East, most likely in the SEC championship game against Alabama, which is most likely going to be true. As much as I want to say LSU, all this and that, and it's going to be Bama. That's going to pretty much be the real deal. But I just look at Georgia, and I just want to see how they play against Clemson, how they will play against a formidable team, because this could be a college football playoff matchup. This could be a 1 versus 4 or a 2 versus 3, and we get that previewed week 1, Saturday, September 4th. But the main concern is it's at Clemson. If this were at Georgia, I'd look at a different ballgame, but it's in Clemson.
It's in Charlotte, North Carolina, so not necessarily Clemson, but, it's
closer there.
Right.
Closer to Clemson than it is to the University of Georgia. And I look at it, I like their over/under at 10.5. It makes sense because you look at their schedule. This team does pretty much have 10 wins, but like Ethan mentioned earlier, they are a banged up team. We don't know what's going on with Eric Gilbert, and Georgia's also known for breaking their team's hearts. When they made it to the national championship game, they had a 2nd and 26, and they let Tua Tagovailoa throw a game-winning touchdown to Devontae Smith to seal a national championship. And then the SEC championship meltdown to LSU, where they just let LSU dog walk them. It wasn't even close. It was a dog walk. And it's just, this is the year where I wouldn't say it's the same as Dan Mullen's, where if Georgia does bad, Kirby Smart's out the door. But this will be the year where if Georgia doesn't get over the hump and get towards that top 4, Georgia fans are going to be looking at Kirby Smart and say, how many more chances are we going to give to you, dude? You had a chance in the national championship game. You blew that one, but people understand because it's Alabama. You have Tua, you have Devontae Smith, all this first-round talent. We could give you a pass for losing to LSU because that was one of the greatest college football teams we've ever seen in a long time. We give you a pass there. But what happened last year really shouldn't have been an excuse. Like you should have been in the SEC championship game. You should not have lost to Florida in that Florida-Georgia game. You should have won that game. You should have been in that SEC championship game. That's already hit there. This year for Georgia, you have to make it to the SEC championship game. You have to make it over. You have to get over the hump because you look at that top four, it's very hard and very selective, especially when pretty much the top three teams are already slated in stone. Like you could book it for Bama, you could book it for Clemson, and book it for Ohio State. Pretty much off the bat, that's three teams, which means there's only one more slot at that number 4. And if you're Georgia, you better have a damn good convincing case to get that 4th seed. And by that, I mean you better find a way to beat Clemson, and you better find a way to keep it close against Bama, or else you ain't getting in at number 4. And just look at this Georgia team, and do they have the potential to get in the top 4? Absolutely. They have the potential to get there. But can they get the job done in the big games? We know you can win the small games against the South Carolinas, against the Arkansas, against Kentucky. But can you win those games against Clemson? Can you win those games against Florida? Win those games against Alabama? That's where it's going to really count for Georgia. And that's kind of why I have them as an under for 10.5. If this were at 10, I would say kind of ride the even or maybe even go the over. Mm-hmm. But with it being at 10.5, I just think they're going to ride with the under because I look at this Georgia team. I see 2, maybe 3 losses. I see them losing to Clemson opening week. And I may even think it may be a double-digit loss. I think it'll be one of those to where it's close for 3.5 quarters, and then Clemson is just going to pull away at the end. And then you also look at you got the game against Florida. These 2 teams could be very different by the time October, November hits. One could be in a good trajectory, another could be in bad trajectory. We have to see when they find out if they can make it there. And then even on top of that, if you make it to the SEC championship game, you're most likely going up against Alabama. That's gonna be a hard out, especially when Nick Saban pretty much owns his assistants. Like almost every assistant that he's played, he has a pretty much a winning record against his assistants. So that's gonna be a hard ask there. So I'm gonna ride with the under for 10.5 for Georgia, but they have to win 10 games. If you're Georgia, you can't afford to be a 9-win team. You have to win 10 games and try and make a case for top 4.
And I think for the case of Kirby Smart, you're thinking back to Georgia when what's his name? Mark Richt was the head coach. You know, it's just going to be, we get to this point, but we can't, win the big one. We can't necessarily get to the point that we want to get to. So you like if as a Georgia fan, you don't necessarily want to be looking at Kirby Smart like you were looking at with Mark Richt. But besides the point, I think a little bit different than you here, Matt. I think Georgia wins that opening game against Clemson. Clemson bringing in a freshman quarterback right off the bat in a big game. He's going to really have to prove himself. I don't know if he's ready for that. I think it'll be a good game, but I don't know if he's ready for that shining moment that is going to need to take place. JT Daniels, a little bit more of a veteran guy in there for Georgia, a little bit more comfortable in the situation. But a little question marks for Georgia. They're going to be missing probably 2 of the top guys that on either side of the ball. So on offense, they lost George Pickens, their best wide receiver heading into this year to an ACL tear. So he's going to be out for the whole season. And then the question marks like you guys spoke about earlier with Eric Gilbert not being there, not to mention that they lost pretty much the whole back end of their, defense with Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes in the cornerback room, and then Azeez Ojulari as well going into the NFL. So a couple pieces that they're going to have to, try and work around, maybe play with a little depth there in the backfield instead of just playing with your stars. Their running back room looks good with Zamir White and James Cook. So offense looks fine. We're going to need to see some guys step up at the wide receiver position, but I don't expect that to be a problem at a place like Georgia. Like Ethan mentioned, their schedule lines up fairly well for them. 4 of their 6 first games are at home before they have to go play Florida and Jacksonville. I am going to lean here to the over 10.5. I think maybe their only loss most likely will come, in that SEC championship game against Alabama, and they sneak into the fourth spot there as a one-loss SEC team, as long as they keep that SEC championship game in respectable loss instead of something like a double-digit loss. So I'm going to lean here to the over 10.5.
I'm going under. I think ukulele kills them.
Okay. Well, that's fine. You guys I've disagreed with both of you so far up to this point. We'll keep it moving here in the SEC East, and we'll go over to Kentucky, sitting at an over or under 7 wins. Their non-conference games look like University of Louisiana Monroe, UTC, the University of Tennessee Chattanooga, New Mexico State, and at Louisville. Pretty nice non-conference schedule there for Kentucky. What are your guys' thoughts on the over or under 7 for Kentucky? They're usually hanging probably right around there, 8 wins or so. So it'll be interesting. They've got, a real interesting QB battle. Will Levi out of Penn State transfer, Joey Gatewood, of course, and then Bo Allen as well. So toss it around. You guys let me know what you think about Kentucky and their over-under win total of 7.
Well, Gatewood transferred after Levi was named a starter 3 days ago. So I'm going to go with Kentucky finally has their guy at quarterback. They're set. So they're moving into the year about 2.5 weeks before the year. They have their set guy. So you got Monroe as a win. Missouri's iffy. Then Chattanooga, South Carolina are wins. Florida should be a loss, but you never know. LSU should be a win. Georgia should be a loss. Mississippi State, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, New Mexico State, and Louisville should all be wins. I'll go with the over for them. They have a fairly easy end to the year.
Yeah, I agree with Ethan as well. I'm going to go with the over on the 7-win total. I mean, I look at their schedule. They have a lot of easy wins all the way until I would say the 3-week stretch. When you got Florida, you got LSU, and you got Georgia. Those 3 games right there, I think, will kind of depend how Kentucky looks. Like, would I be shocked if they lose all 3? No, I wouldn't be shocked if they lose all 3. But if they could keep it interesting, then I think the football program could be one of those where some people could look at it and say, hey, maybe Kentucky could be one of those teams where they may be unranked right now, but maybe by the end of the season, if they keep it close, they could maybe sneak into the top 25, maybe be like 25 to 20 range. And then, like Ethan mentioned, they close it off with the simple schedule like Vanderbilt, New Mexico State, Louisville. I would easily say you go with over. This team right here with this schedule, they have at least I'd honestly say like eight wins in them. I would honestly say like the losses I could see them losing to Florida. I could see them losing to LSU. I for sure see them losing to Georgia. One thing is for certain, if somehow, some way Kentucky upsets Georgia, fans are going to be wanting Kirby Smart's head. If Kentucky goes into UGA and they pull off a classic upset, Kirby Smart is not going to be desired in Georgia. They're going to be wanting his head because it'd be another year, another disappointment, another failure of failing to make the college football playoff. If that happens, will it happen? Probably not. But if it does, don't say I warned you. Like they will be wanting Kirby Smart's head if that so happens. But yeah, overall for Kentucky, over 7 wins. I feel you could pretty much book it on that. I feel like if they don't get the over on 7 wins, you may have to look elsewhere. But 7 wins is a good mark for them. They could hit the over on that side of the front.
I agree with both of you. I like over for Kentucky. I feel like they year in, year out sit right around 8 to 10, depending on the year. So their schedule, they have a lot of home games. 4 of their first 5 games are at home besides that visit to South Carolina, or 6 games, 5 out of their first 6 games are at home, including that LSU and Florida game. So those are big matchups for them. That 3-game stretch is not easy, like you were talking about, Matt, but overall, fairly nice schedule for them. If they come out and they start 4-0 heading into that Florida game, they're going to have a lot of confidence coming in there and could possibly be able to spring an upset. Even though they are at home, they'll still probably be an underdog as long as Florida has a decent start to their season as well. But I like over 7 there. They've got a lot of guys that are coming back on the offensive line. Josh Allen had 54 receptions last year for him. He's coming back. They also got a Nebraska transfer wide receiver in Wan'Dale Robinson, who's supposed to be a pretty good guy as well. Good backfield in the run game. They have to replace a lot on defense with only 4 starters coming back, but they've got a guy in DeAndre Square who is going to be their leader at the linebacker position. So just keep an eye on, the secondary and some of those defensive linemen as well. Secondary is kind of solid, not necessarily super solid, but they've got experience back there, guys who have been there for a pretty decent amount of time. So I like Kentucky to spring the over there as well with you guys. So I think we're all in agreement there. So we'll just keep moving along and chugging along here and looking at the Missouri Tigers. They are as well sitting at an over or under 7 wins. Their non-conference schedule with Central Michigan, Southeast Missouri State, at Boston College, and North Texas. 5 of their first 7 are at home. They travel to Georgia in early November and host Florida towards the end of their schedule. And I don't know a whole lot about their quarterback, but Connor Bazelak will be the starter for them. So what are your thoughts on the Missouri Tigers, guys?
Well, I mean, first off, Luther Burden decommitted from Oklahoma a couple days ago, yesterday. If you don't know who that is the number 1 player in the state of Illinois, the number 2 wide receiver in the country, and the number 6 player nationally. Due to that, his new top 2 are Oklahoma and Missouri. If Missouri somehow lands him, their future is extremely bright. I just wanted to go into that a little bit just because it's not every day Missouri's in the running for a top 6, top 5, top whatever player in the country. But like you said, over 7, that's kind of looking nice when you look at their non-conference because you have Central Michigan, Southeast Missouri State, Boston College, North Texas. Boston College is the only team that might give them a challenge. But in reality, they should go 4-0. Tennessee's a coin flip. A&M, they should lose. Vanderbilt, they should win. South Carolina, they should win. Arkansas, they should win. That's about 8 games, give or take 9. Yeah, I like it. I like the over here. I mean, they might be able to go into Georgia, go into Florida, whatever. I could see an upset there, but I like Missouri. I like their running back a lot, Tyler Batty. He's going to be one of my favorite running backs in the SEC to watch.
Yeah, I agree with you as well, Ethan. I see the over-under 7 wins. I feel like they could easily hit the over. Looking at their schedule, they are set up very nice. Like their first, 5 of their first couple games, they are at home. I feel like their only toughest games, in my honest opinion, that they'll have to play. That game against Texas A&M is going to be very hard. The game against Georgia and against Florida, those are all going to be tough contests there for Missouri. It'll be interesting to see how they hold up against those top teams because the thing with the program like Missouri is not really about like your win or loss record. It's about how you perform against those big teams. How you perform against Texas A&M, how you perform against Georgia, how you perform against Florida, that's going to kind of send a message to the college recruits. Like you mentioned, Ethan, one of the top receiving prospects. If he sees this Missouri team keeps it close against teams like Texas A&M or Georgia or Florida, if he already decommitted from Oklahoma, he may look at Missouri and say, hey, maybe if I'm on that team, maybe we win those games, and maybe I want to go there. Because that's kind of what Missouri wants. Because a lot of people forget back in the day, a couple years ago, Missouri was one of those programs. Like they were at one point a top 10 program. If you look at 5-6 years ago, they were in the ranks as one of the top programs in the SEC. Obviously, as the years go by, you dip in performance a little bit. But Missouri last year, they did have some solid wins. Remember, they had a solid win against LSU last year or earlier in the season. Even though it was a banged-up LSU, you still have to consider it a win just because of that LSU marquee program. So you look at Missouri, if, like I mentioned earlier, if they could keep it close against those top-ranked teams, they could keep it close against A&M or Georgia or Florida, recruits are going to look at that and simply say, maybe I want to dice it up. Maybe I want to go to Missouri. Maybe that could be a team or a program where if I could go there, maybe I could help elevate that program into a program that could one day be ranked like they were a couple years ago. I believe when they had Drew Lock, I think if I'm not mistaken, they were ranked in the top 25. So maybe one day they could get there. But over under 7 wins, agree with Ethan. They could easily hit the over. If they hit the under, if they don't reach 7 wins, I think you might have to switch up the coaching staff.
I think 7 wins right here is the exact number that it should be at for their over-under. I think BC is going to be a little bit of a tougher game than most think. I think BC is a really good football team, and you're having to play them on the road. Doesn't make it any easier, especially early on in the season as your third game that you'll be playing because you got that bye that second week. But if I were to play it, I'd play the over as well. I don't have a lot of trust in Tennessee, new head coach. Don't have a lot of trust against Texas A&M. I got a lot of trust in them against Tennessee, not a lot of trust against Texas A&M. Vanderbilt should be a win. Georgia lost. South Carolina should be a win. Florida, a loss. And then Arkansas, a win. So, at most, you could see them losing 4 games, I believe, just looking at their schedule, and that puts them right at 8. So I agree with you guys. I don't know a whole lot about their quarterback or a lot about, their team as a whole. I do know their offensive line returns 4 starters, and that's huge. Keeping that continuity across the offensive line is huge for any team, no matter what conference you're in or no matter what team you're in. So that bodes well for them. If everyone stays healthy, they should be looking good. Defense returning a lot of depth as well. So I'm going to lean here to the over with Missouri, even though I don't know a whole lot about their team. Their schedule lines up pretty nicely for them. And with that being said, we'll move on to our next SEC East team, and that's going to be the South Carolina Gamecock, sitting here at over under 3.5 wins. Their out of conference games are Eastern Illinois, ECU, Troy, and Clemson. Their QB battle they got going on: Luke Doty, Jason Brown, and Colton Gautier. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with these Gamecocks. So your guys' thoughts? Their schedule doesn't necessarily look like it's all that easy for them. So Ethan, what are your thoughts, man?
Only game I see that they could potentially be a guaranteed win on their schedule would be Vanderbilt. Eastern Illinois is one of the better FCS programs. Eastern Carolina potentially can make a run in the CUSA or America. I don't know why I'm blanking what conference they're in. And then you got Troy, who has been one of the better teams in the Sun Belt the past decade. Obviously, they're on a fall, but you never know. This is a Troy team that's beaten LSU team. So just to take a little shot at Matt.
Mm-hmm. That was like 3-4 years ago. But yes, it
was.
Happen.
But at that point, I was considering Troy in my college options, so I liked it. But I don't see them winning any SEC game but Vanderbilt. So I'm gonna go with under here. I don't think they can win any more than 2 of their non-conference games.
Yeah, I agree with you as well, Ethan. I just look at the schedule and, pretty much going to ride with the under. I think it's going to be very hard to pick out 3 wins. You look at Vanderbilt, I could see, maybe against Troy, I could see maybe Eastern Illinois. And that's about it. It's very bleak. Especially when now they do versus some big teams, and if you're big teams watching this, you better not embarrass yourself against South Carolina, because college football committee going to look at you and easily pick you out. Don't matter if you have 1 loss; they're going to look at that 1 loss and say you really lost to South Carolina. Like, could you imagine? Look at this: like they play a 5th ranked Georgia, 6th ranked A&M, 13th ranked Florida, and a 3rd seed Clemson. If one of those teams somehow loses to South Carolina, you could pretty much book them out of the college football playoff. You ain't getting in the college football playoff when you got a loss against South Carolina. I don't care if you only have 1 loss and you're a conference championship winner. They're going to look at you and say, boy, you lost to South Carolina. You don't even belong here. I don't care that you won the national. I don't care that you won your conference championship. You lost to South Carolina. They barely got 3 wins. Get out of here. You know what I mean? Like if you look at like, for example, if somehow they upset Clemson. Clemson's schedule is they don't have a lot of tough games besides maybe Georgia. If the Clemson somehow goes undefeated, but their 1 loss is to somehow South Carolina, you're not getting a college football playoff if you're Clemson. I don't care that you have Dabo Swinney as your head coach. You're not going to persuade the college football playoff when they already have a hard out on Clemson already, just because the ACC itself is a weak conference. Like, it's one thing, like, if it's an SEC, a powerful, tough conference, you have 1 loss, depending on the team, they might give you a pass. But if you're Clemson, the ACC, and you somehow lose to South Carolina, you could pretty much kiss the top 4 goodbye, regardless of if you win the ACC championship game, just because your 1 loss really is to South Carolina. We're going to keep Georgia out, whose only loss is to Bama, but your loss is to South Carolina. Come on, like that's just the worst case scenario. But in all honesty, South Carolina, you have no expectations. Your over under is 3.5. If you hit the over, great. Will we be shocked if you hit the under? No. So it's just sit back, relax. If you're a college kid, drink a couple beers, tailgate, enjoy it, and enjoy the show, and see how long it will take for your team to get blown out by one of these good schools like Georgia. Maybe you can make a bet with your buddies and say, I give this team a quarter to keep it in the ball game. And if you lose a quarter, then bam, take a shot.
Yeah. The only positive piece here for South Carolina is their running back, Kevin Harris. Dude's pretty damn good. So hand the ball off to him on every single play. He probably deserves 60 touches a game, considering you don't know what you're going to do at quarterback, and none of these guys are going to do anything.
He's definitely the best second. He's definitely the second best running back in the SEC.
So it's hard to look at the schedule and be like, 4 games you can win. It's hard to do that. I agree. I'm gonna go with you guys in the under 3.5 here. It's probably not the popular pick. I'm sure people are like, oh, you just look at the schedule: Eastern Illinois, East Carolina, and Troy. Those are 3 easy wins, and then Vanderbilt an easy win too, and put them at 4. But I don't think that's the case. Starting off the year, it's gonna be interesting. If they get those first 2 wins, then that's good for them. Going forward, moving forward, and until they play Georgia, but we'll see if they drop one of those, which I fully expect them to. So with that being said, I'm going to lean here to the under with y'all, and then we'll keep it moving because there's not a whole lot that we need to keep going on with South Carolina. And that brings up our second to last team in the East, in Tennessee, sitting at over or under 6. Obviously, new head coach Josh Heupel coming in from UCF with the outing of Pruitt. Their non-conference schedule: Bowling Green, Pitt, Tennessee Tech, and South Alabama. QB battle we got working: Harrison Bailey versus Joe Milton, obviously the transfer from Michigan, and Virginia Tech transfer Hendon Hooker and Brian Maurer. 4 quarterback race there in Tennessee. What are your guys' thoughts on the over/under 6 there for the University of Tennessee?
I'm going to say straight up, they're going under. I think that they beat Bowling Green. I think Pitt is tough. I'll give it to Pitt, though. This is Pitt we're talking about. They have a very solid producing team. Tennessee Tech, it's embarrassing if you lose to, so that's 2 wins there. Florida, Mizzou, you're going to lose. All right, South Carolina, that's 3. Ole Miss, all right, I'll give it to you 4. Bama, Kentucky, Georgia, nope. I have you losing to South Alabama, and I'll give them Vanderbilt. That's 5 wins. I think that South Alabama is going to be just a random team to upset them. I love the Sun Belt. I have Sun Belt bias. Kill me. We'll go South Alabama over Tennessee, and Tennessee doesn't make a bowl game.
Ethan makes a compelling argument, and I'll be honest, I want to blame him. I mean, I personally agree. I could see them going under 6. You have a new head coach. You have a new head coach in there. You have not only 1 quarterback battle, you got 4 quarterbacks battling for the Saints.
2 of them who are transfers who are coming in and expecting to probably start.
Exactly. 2 of them being transfers. It's going to be hard to balance it out between those. And then you have tough opponents you got to match up against. You got to go at Gainesville at the Swamp in September. You then got to go to Alabama, the top-ranked team in the nation. And then on top of that, you got to play host to the University of Georgia in mid-November, and Georgia is probably going to be rolling in peak shape because they're probably going to try to make their case to be a top 4 team in all of college football. It's not going to be good for Tennessee. I do think they could maybe bounce back next year when the head coach has the first year under his belt, and maybe they have their solidified quarterback at hand. But as for right now, the under of 6, I would say, is pretty favorable. It would make sense, especially with all the new guys involved. 4 QBs trying to battle that same position and 2 of them being transfer students. It's going to be tough to see. It's going to be a tough year once again for the Tennessee Volunteers, but patience is key. And, you just have to wait another year and maybe one day you'll make it back to a bowl game. but this year will not be the year.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you guys. Under 6, new head coach coming in. Although that should improve the offense. Josh Heupel, much better offensive-minded coach than Jeremy Pruitt was or is. So the offense should be better than it has been in the past, but their schedule does not make it any easier for them. Like you said, that Pittsburgh game, I think they lose, even though it's at home. And the rest of their schedule at Florida, at Missouri, rough stretch there, both away games. South Carolina should be a win. I think they lose to Ole Miss. I think the Lane train has got things rolling there at Ole Miss. Bama, hard too. Luckily, you get a bye after that before heading to Kentucky, which you should still probably lose. Georgia, and then 2 wins to end out the year against South Alabama and Vanderbilt, sitting somewhere around 4 to 5 wins. I think for Tennessee next year, until they can start building some momentum on the recruiting trail and everything else, I don't think it's going to happen. We'll see if Josh Heupel can get it going in his second year. But this first year is going to be quite a bit of a struggle for him. So I'm going to ride with the under 6 with you guys. And that leads us into our last team. This one can be pretty quick since I'm sure not a lot of us know a whole lot about what Vanderbilt is doing. So over under 3 games for the University of Vanderbilt, or Vanderbilt University, excuse me. Non-conference against ETSU, Colorado State, Stanford, and Connecticut. They have an odd schedule for their first 5 at home, followed by 2 on the road, and then 3 at home with back-to-back road games to close out the season. Their quarterback is Ken Seals. Don't know a whole lot about him. New offensive coordinator and David Raw has NFL experience, but he's going to have his work cut out for him. You know, it's Vanderbilt, and you're in the SEC. So best of luck. So quick thoughts here on Vanderbilt over 3 or under 3.
I mean, the better question would be, it should be, why is it this high? Like, I'm getting 1 win, ETSU, if that. Connecticut's back playing football, but they still have a decent team. Stanford, Colorado State. Neither of which are phenomenal teams, but this is Vanderbilt we're talking about. It should be over under 1.5, if we're being completely honest with you. Maybe even 0.5 over under. I'll take under easily. I'd bet my house on it.
Yeah, I agree with Ethan as well. I go with the under as well. I don't see a lot of winnable games. I mean, their only highlight last year was bringing in Sarah Fuller, and that was it. That was legit the only highlight you could talk about for Vanderbilt last year.
Yeah, gotta make noise somewhere else outside of actually playing.
Yeah, you have to make a noise somewhere else. This is the SEC. In my honest opinion, Vanderbilt don't even belong in the SEC. They need to leave the conference and just move somewhere else ASAP, please, because it's almost like you're bringing SEC a bad name, a bad rep.
Yeah, it's an automatic win if you're an SEC team, pretty much.
Yeah, it's almost like when a pitcher goes to bat in the National League, like an easy out, guaranteed out, unless if it's Jacob DeGrom, then you might have some problems. DeGrom could hit. But besides that, for the most part, Vanderbilt under 3.5. I'm even shocked they gave them 3. I thought for sure if you were a bet gambling side, you'd give them 2. And even 2 is asking price maybe. But you look at over under 3. Yeah, I'm putting under like Ethan said. Now I wouldn't put a house on it, but I'd put a good sum of money on the under 3 because you're gonna make a profit.
Yeah, it would be. I think it would be nice sitting at 3.5 because then it would be an easy under for me to take because I think 3 is right on the line. I think they do get 3 wins. I think East Tennessee State they win, and then I think they beat South Carolina somehow, some way. I have more trust in the Vanderbilt squad than I do South Carolina squad. I have no reason why to tell you that, but I just don't have a lot of trust in South Carolina right now. And then maybe that game against UConn. So I would put them right around 3 wins. So I think they break it even, but since it's sitting at 3, you can't really do much. So I would say go under here as well. And we're going to pick that up here. We're going to pick up the pace a little bit more here heading into the West. And we're going to start with the best team in the SEC West, over under 11.5 wins for the University of Alabama. Obviously, they start the game in Atlanta against Miami, or the season, play Mercer, Southern Miss, and New Mexico State out of conference. Bryce Young coming in to be the quarterback, now making 7 figures off of endorsement deals and everything like that. Offense got a lot to work around with 3 starters and, lost a ton of talent as well as their offensive coordinator and Steve Sarkisian. Bryce Young obviously has some huge shoes to fill in the quarterbacks that he is replacing over the past 3 or 4 or 5 years or so. But he still got John Mechie and Slade Bolden to help him out. Good tight end there in Billingsley. So Offensive line going to need to be restacked. Defense sustained some fewer losses, but they lost Barmore, Surtain, and Dylan Moses, obviously. But it's Alabama. It's going to be Alabama. So 11.5 wins. What are your guys' thoughts?
I'm going to go the over just because, like you said, it is Alabama. Only one game I could see them losing is A&M, and that's really that's just if Bama screws up. Like, there's no other reason that Bama should lose a game.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Ethan. Over 11.5, pretty simple. Their only toughest game is against A&M, but that's only because it's on the road. I mean, last time they played each other, Bama pretty much kicked A&M's ass by like 28 points. Basically sent Jimbo Fisher to the grave. Well, not actually to the grave. He's a good head coach, but I'm just saying that game, you just put the hammer on and basically showed him who's boss. And I mean, yeah, they play LSU, but this ain't 2019 LSU. This is 2021 LSU, and it's going to be bad. Now, will I say it was as bad as last year when Bama pretty much mollywopped them like 55 to maybe like 10? No, I don't think it'll be that bad, but it's still going to be double digits. I wouldn't be shocked if LSU lost by like 2 scores. And then, I mean, I would say if there would be a team that could somehow shock Bama, I wouldn't be surprised if it were Auburn, just because the Iron Bowl, you always have crazy shenanigans that happen, and it always seems like whenever it's in Auburn, crazy stuff can go down. You look at the kick 6 happen at Auburn. And then you look at 2 years ago, Bama had a chance to get in the college football playoff, and their kicker pulled a doink a kick. They lose the game because of it. Obviously, Ethan has flashbacks whenever they see a field goal hit the post. But for the most part, over, under 11.5, easily hit the over. Only loss I can maybe see Alabama is either in the semifinals or in the championship game, and that's about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of conflicted here. I think there's 3 games that you have to look out for. Obviously, that first game against Miami, a little bit more not talented, but a little bit more veteran group with De'Aaron King behind center for them. So I think that'll be a little bit tougher game, but I expect them to win it. And then obviously that Texas A&M game and Auburn game, both on the road. They should beat Auburn, but that Texas A&M game, it's going to be a different Texas A&M squad. Jimbo, if we remember that game in Jimbo's first year at Texas A&M playing Alabama, they were actually able to hang in there for at least a half before Alabama kind of took over. So Jimbo has probably been the guy other than Kirby Smith that's an Saban coordinator that has been able to keep games close with him, or at least try to. So that'll be a good game to watch for sure. If I had to lean towards one side here, I would say under 11.5. New quarterback coming in, a lot of different pieces you're having to mesh in. It'll be interesting, but I would slide to the under just because at 11.5 you expect him to go undefeated. It's a long, grueling season, so I'd lean towards the under here. But with that being said, we'll move on from Alabama and go to Arkansas, sitting at over 5.5 games. I'm not at a conference schedule. Rice, Texas, Georgia Southern, and Arkansas Pine Bluff. KJ Jefferson returning to play quarterback. First 3 games at home, followed by 3 on the road, including facing Texas A&M. And then they follow that with 3 straight home and then tough road trips to LSU and Alabama before coming back home from Missouri to close the season out. What are your thoughts on over 5.5 for the Arkansas Razorbacks?
No, I actually think that they get a solid 5 wins, including but not limited to Rice, Texas, and Georgia Southern. I think they go 3-0 to start the season.
Obviously, you think Arkansas is going to be Texas?
I'm very low on Texas. I am very low on Texas.
Your hate for John Krevling and his Texas Longhorns
are
through the roof. I've never seen somebody be such a hater, be such a horns down guy. Like if there was a definition of horns down, it would be Ethan's face with the horns down on it.
Oh yeah, no, don't worry. I root for any team that goes against Penn too, just to make Ben upset. We are doing Creating Madness. We're going worst 4 conferences college basketball. We're putting the Ivies in last just so that we could screw with them. But I think that they get those 4 wins, and then hell, you could throw in an LSU or a Mississippi State or an Ole Miss win, and they're going to win one of those 3. They're not going to.
I'd give them Ole Miss.
I'll give them Ole Miss. It's going to be one of those 3.
But yeah, it is a good case. I kind of look at this schedule for Arkansas. I'm honestly not shocked if they go with the under. I mean, looking at their schedule, they have a tough schedule. They don't have Felipe Franks anymore as a QB. The QB is KJ Jefferson. We don't really know a lot about KJ Jefferson. That's why I'm rolling with the under. And you also have to look at, you're in the SEC. It's a tough conference to play in, and I just think under 5.5 for Arkansas, I feel like it makes sense. I feel like they're one of those. If it were at 5, I think you could go with the over. But with it being 5.5, I don't see where you could pick out a 6th game for Arkansas to win. That's why I'm going with the under.
I think bookmakers hit it right on the head here with 5.5. I keep looking at their schedule. I keep coming up with either 5 or 6 wins. One or two of those being a toss-up. So I think they got it right sitting here at 5.5. Kendall Briles returning as the offensive coordinator is a huge plus for them, even with having to replace Felipe Franks at the quarterback position. KJ Jefferson was there before. So he knows how to run that system now. He's been able to sit behind Felipe Franks, see how it's run. Their schedule is hit or miss here, but they've got pretty much every single starter returning. They've got 17 total starters returning, so that bodes well for them. So I have to lean to the over here at 5.5. They may be pulling out that they necessarily shouldn't, and maybe that is Texas, like Ethan was saying. Who knows? But I like the over 5.5 here for Arkansas.
For sure. Moving into Auburn, a team that I'm pretty sure that you, Matt, are actually high on. Over-under of 7 wins. Looking at the team, just going into their roster, that quarterback running back duo is going to be the main thing to look at. Bo Nix and Tank Bigsby. Bigsby, he's one of the better running backs, top 10 in the entire NCAA. I personally have him 3rd in the SEC. But Bo Nix, freshman year, SEC Freshman of the Year, one of the better ones. What are you going to say about that? Bo Nix, can you do it? I mean, looking at their schedule, you have Akron. It's Akron. Alabama State. Penn State's iffy. Georgia State's a win. LSU's a maybe. Georgia's a loss. Arkansas's a probably win. Ole Miss is a win. Mississippi State's a win. South Carolina's a win. That's 7. So the bookmakers got it right on the nose, just like Caleb said last time. I'm getting 7 or 8. I'll go over just because this is the Auburn team that could potentially beat Bama.
Ooh, potentially a team that could beat Bama. I'm riding with the. Ooh, I mean, you do have it on the money. I could very well see 7 wins, but I just don't know with Bo Nix. I mean, you talk about he has fallen off. I do remember freshman year when he had that game-winning pass against Oregon, and we thought this kid was something special, and he had a good season. But he's pretty much declined every year since, and I don't know. I don't know if he can keep it up. I mean, you look at Penn State; they're 19th ranked. Who knows what Penn State looks like week 3? But you also have to think it's at Penn State on a Saturday. That's a whiteout game. You mean to tell me Bo Nix is going there during whiteout? And you think he's going to get a win there at Penn State, regardless of how they look? I don't know. I mean, because if there's one thing I know, college atmospheres on a Saturday night, they hit different. I mean, we're talking when Florida State was in its heyday, Saturday night at FSU, you ain't going to get a win at FSU. When you had Jameis Winston there, slinging it down to Kelvin Benjamin, you weren't going to get a win on that Saturday night. That just wasn't going to happen. That's kind of the same thing with the whiteout at Penn State. That whiteout is flowing Saturday night. It's going to be hard to get a win, regardless of what your team is. It's going to be very hard to win there. You then got to go to Death Valley at LSU. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, you may have a better chance of Caleb's dog running around and being a good boy than seeing Auburn beat LSU. That's just not going to happen. And then next week you got Georgia, lost. Then you got to go to A&M. That's going to be another L. And then on top of that, you close out against Bama. Now, like Ethan mentioned, they could pop the upset against Alabama, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean, at Bama, they're just rolling. Like they are the team to beat, the defending national champions again. So, I mean, I look at they do hit it on the money with 7, but if I had to ride with the over or an under, most likely the under at 7 wins, I would say would make the most sense. Maybe just barely slide into a bowl game.
Yeah, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, and Bo Nix. I don't know how that's necessarily going to work out. I have no trust in Bo Nix. Last year is supposed to be the year he took a leap. He actually regressed, in my opinion. Having him come back, I don't know if that's the best thing. Maybe we see TJ Finley take over in the middle of the year, depending on how the schedule goes. But I think this is pretty slammed shut when it comes to what to take, and that's the under 7 here for Auburn. Just too many things not going in their direction. So I'm going to ride with the under here for the Auburn Tigers. And then we'll head into the other Tigers here in the SEC West. And that's going to be LSU sitting at over or under 8.5 wins. Non-conference looking like at UCLA, McNeese State, Central Michigan, University of Louisiana, Monroe. Quarterback is Max Johnson. Obviously, Miles Brennan's broken arm puts more emphasis on the quarterback position. And now Max Johnson being the starter. So with that being said, what do you guys think at 8.5 wins here for the LSU Tigers?
Well, I'm just going to say right now, there's only 2 or 3 players that I like on this LSU team, and they're all on defense. Allie Gay, Eli Ricks, and obviously Derek Stingley. All 3 of those players have top 2 rounds potential. But just looking at the schedule, I think it's going to be more of an individual season performance for those players and not a team-winning season. UCLA, I like DTR. I'll give them the win over LSU. Especially, it's in the Rose Bowl Stadium. Yeah, I'll take UCLA. McNeese State, all right, you guys get your first win. Central Michigan win. Mississippi State win. Auburn, that's iffy to me. Kentucky, you guys should beat. Florida, you guys are probably going to lose to. Ole Miss, 5. Bama loss. Arkansas, 6. Monroe, 7. A&M loss. I like the under here.
Yeah,
I don't think they can get 9 wins.
I'll take it from here and let Matt finish up with his team since LSU is his team. I'm going to go under 8.5 as well. I don't see it. You're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. It's going to be a mess. You lost Terrence Marshall Jr. on the offensive side of the ball. Tight end Eric Gilbert. Nobody knows what the deal is with that. Obviously, him transferring over to Georgia and then not being on team right now. The pass defense last year ranked 127th nationally. Obviously, you got Derek Stingley Jr. back there now, and like he wasn't there last year. But I don't think one player can absolutely start there. Their running game was a mess last year. And then you're having to play a quarterback and Max Johnson that's unproven at the SEC level of play. So under 8.5 here seems like a pretty safe bet to me.
I'm going different. I'm going to go with the over 8.5. I look at this schedule. I kind of like the schedule that LSU has. If we're being honest here, their only toughest games that they have to face is Florida, Alabama, A&M. That's it. Those are the only 3 games that, in my honest opinion, are going to be the toughest games. And in my honest opinion, I feel like LSU can't beat Florida. If Florida can't beat us when we're banged up at Gainesville, I'm sorry. That's Florida ain't going to beat LSU. That's not going to happen. It's at Death Valley. It'll most likely be Saturday night. And I don't know what it is. I just feel like LSU is going to bounce back. I feel like the kind of roster they had last year, it was a lot of unknown guys because LSU came off one of the best seasons, 1 in their program history and 2 in college football history. It was very hard to top those same standards that they set. And now you look at this year.
You didn't even have to top them. You just had, obviously that wasn't going to happen. You just had to be a mediocre football team, and that wasn't even the case.
Well, we were 500. We were not good last year. I will give you that. We had some bad losses, terrible losses. But I feel like you bring back most of the same guys you had last year. It wasn't like you had a lot of turnover. You're bringing back most of the same guys, and I just simply look at this. I just simply look at this schedule, and I just like how they match up against certain teams. I don't feel like it's one of those like harder schedules. Like I like that you don't have to go up against a team like a Georgia or another top 10 team. Like the only 2 top 10 teams that you got are Alabama and A&M. Those are, I can pretty much guarantee you those will be 2 losses. Like those are the 2 losses for LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M. You could pretty much book it. But the rest of the schedule looks very winnable. And especially that game against Florida. A lot of people are going to say Florida could win that game, but I want to say don't sleep on LSU against Florida, because a lot of people did that same thing with Florida and LSU last year. What happens? LSU pulls off the upset with their starting quarterback, Max Johnson. So Max Johnson, yeah, he did have a limited experience, but one of his experience was beating a 6th-ranked Florida team last year. So he knows what it takes to beat a top caliber team in the SEC. It's just a matter of, can he pull it together for a full season? That will kind of be the toss-up in the air. But I also just feel like Ed Orgeron is going to come back with some vengeance. I mean, he was not good last year. Obviously had a lot of players go to the draft. His offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, went to Carolina. He had a lot of turnover. He had a lot of turnover last year, and a lot of things did not go his way. His QB, Miles Brennan, gets hurt. He stuck with TJ Finley, Max Johnson, who are unproven. He got dealt a lot of hands, a lot of cards, and it did not perform well. But I feel like this year, with everything kind of seemingly under order, you have your set QB in Max Johnson. Even though Brennan got hurt again, at least you have your set guy in Max Johnson, who Ed Orgeron believes in. I mean, you saw Coach O in the SEC press conference. He says that we have two potential QBs that could potentially win the national championship. Now, it won't happen because you got to go through Bama or Clemson. But he says you have the capability, which means he has belief in his QBs. He has belief in Max Johnson. So he's going to try and lead them to some success. That's why I'm going with the over. The over of 8.5 looks good. Whether they get 9 or 10, I think the over looks fantastic.
All right. It could be a hit or miss there for the LSU Tigers. But moving on, we got Mississippi State over under 6 game. One of my favorite head coaches, Mike Leach, still there at Mississippi State. Out of conference games, Louisiana Tech, NC State, at Memphis, and Tennessee State. 3 of the 4 games are at home, including a early road game at Memphis. They also get to host Bama and LSU, so that bodes well for them. But then they have to travel to A&M and Auburn, and their last 2 games are at home. They got a QB battle going on with Will Rogers, as well as Southern Miss transfer Jack Abraham. Year 2 for Mike Leach. What are your guys' thoughts on over 6 wins or under 6 wins for the Mississippi State Bulldogs?
I actually like the over here. I think they have 5 very winnable games, and then they have 3 or 4 questions. I like Mike Leach. I like the air raid. I think you have your guy at quarterback. You don't have a transfer now. I'm really excited to see what Mr. Will Rogers can do. And along with that, I mean, you have a relatively young team. You have a couple of your starting 4 wide receivers being sophomores or younger. Then you have your quarterback and running back being a sophomore. Yeah, and you have your cornerback number 2, Emmanuel Forbes, who I personally have as top 20 corner, being sophomore. So they have a young team. I could see Mike Leach taking this team on an LSU-type run like Matt has his team going, but in 2 years.
All right. I look at Mississippi State, and I kind of agree with you as well, Ethan. I feel like second year under Mike Leach, I do believe they will hit the over because they're over under 6 wins. I do believe that they could hit the over. And I just love Mike Leach's energy. I feel like he personally can be that guy to maybe turn Mississippi State around into like a respectable team. And I wouldn't be shocked if they just barely hit the over, whether that be like sliding it over like 7 wins or so, but over under 6, you could hit the over. And who wouldn't want to hit the over? Because you got Mike Leach. You just love the kind of energy he brings.
Absolutely. Mike Leach is the over king, especially when it comes to over points in a game. So I'm going to sit with you guys and go with the over as well. I came up with 6 just looking at the schedule myself, and there's probably one in there that they win that they might not, aren't expected to win. So I like the over 6 there for Mississippi State. I actually would say that's probably my favorite play out of all these SEC over under win totals is Mississippi State going over. Mike Leach another year in that air raid system. Will Rogers obviously coming back. That's huge for them. They started off really hot last year against LSU, and then they, kind of fell off a bit, but now they got a different quarterback in there than they had at the start of last season. And, Will Rogers ended out the season. But Will Rogers, I expect a lot from him. Going to be able to sling the ball around the field. Mike Leach is going to let him, whether he throws picks or not. They're going to win that way. So they've got a little bit of depth, a little bit of experience. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I expect a lot of points from Mississippi State. Now it's going to be able to see whether that defense holds up on that end of things. But I like them to reach over 6 wins here, either right at 6 or sitting right there, like you said, Matt, at 7 wins. And with that being said, probably we got 2 more teams here. The next team up is going to be the Ole Miss Rebels under Lane Train there in Oxford, Mississippi, over under 7.5 wins, non-conference games against Louisville, in Atlanta, Austin Peay, Tulane, and Liberty. And obviously a lot of people's maybe underdog for the Heisman, depending on how Ole Miss's season turns out. Their quarterback, Matt Corral, coming back again. What are your guys' thoughts on over under 7.5 wins for the Ole Miss Rebels there in Oxford, Mississippi?
Well, this is my second favorite under bet, only behind Vanderbilt, because they're Vanderbilt. I have them getting at most 7 wins. I could see them getting as low as 3 or 4, but I think they go 6-6 this year. I think Liberty is a very tough non-conference game for them. I think Louisville could potentially be a very tough non-conference game for them. And then you also have to deal with the tough in-state Egg Bowl. You have to deal with Tennessee hoping to get a win, LSU wanting to actually make a name for themselves, Auburn wanting to prove that Bo Nix can actually play. They have so many tough games that are close. And then you also have the 2 obvious losses against A&M and Bama. It's not looking good for this team. I mean, obviously, if they are able to get a 10-win year and Matt Corral can look like baby Jesus, then you know what? Give him the Heisman. Why not? But I got him going 6-6, and Corral being a 5th-round, 6th-round quarterback. So,
yeah, I agree with you as well, Ethan. I'd go with the under. I mean, they look like a 500 team. I mean, if they were to maybe be above 500, it'd be like 7-5. That's about it. Like they're pretty much a 500 team. Looking at their schedule, you got those tough games against A&M, LSU, Alabama, and those are just games that teams are ranked in. And then Mississippi State, that's going to be a tough one. Auburn is going to be a tough one. You can make the case for Tennessee just because it's at Tennessee. If it were at Ole Miss, it'd be a different ball game. But at Tennessee on the road, going to be hard to win those games. And just look at Ole Miss and. Lane Kiffin's going to have them boys competing, but I think they'll just finish at 500, like Ethan mentioned, 6-6.
Yeah, I'm sitting right at 8 wins for him, so I'm going to go over. Looking at the schedule, I don't know why. I'm a big Lane Kiffin guy. I like what he does. I love the energy he brings. I love the things that he runs from an offensive standpoint. I think he's great at it, and so ultimately, what it's going to come down to is the defensive side of the ball. They were very lackluster, especially in the secondary last year, giving up tons of yardage in over the passing game. So that's going to have to be something that they have to figure out coming into this upcoming season. But I have a lot of faith in Lane Kiffin. I have a lot of faith in Matt Corral. I mean, Matt Corral threw for 29 touchdowns last year, and you can only see him start to improve at another year in Lane Kiffin's offensive system. Yes, he's losing wide receivers in Elijah Moore and Kenny Ebo, but he's still got Datario Drummond and Braylon Sanders, who are coming back after pretty decent seasons in their own right last year. I've got a lot of confidence in them. They might start the year off 0-1. Louisville's a tough team. Their head coach there is pretty good. I'm a very big fan of him. And then after that, you win your next 2 games against Austin Peay, Tulane before heading in the bye, go 2-1. Bama start 2-2 after that. Arkansas 3-2. Tennessee 4-2. LSU 5-2. Auburn 6-2. Lose to Liberty, go 6-3. Lose to Texas A&M, goes 6-4, and then I think you win out your next 2 games against Vanderbilt and obviously the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State, and that puts them right at 8 wins. So I think 7.5 is probably the right number. Either take it over or take it under. That's your choice, your opinion. But I like the over just because I got a lot of trust in Lane Kiffin and what he's got building there in Oxford, Mississippi. But that leads us to our last team and perhaps the second favorite to win the SEC West behind Alabama, and that's the Fighting Jimbo Fishers there in College Station in Texas A&M. Over under 9.5. Non-conference games look like Kent State, Colorado, which is going to be played in Denver, not actually at Colorado's home field. New Mexico and Prairie View A&M. QB battle, we got Zach Calzada and Haynes King, so a new quarterback going to be coming in there for Jimbo Fisher. Not like that's ever been a problem for Jimbo, as he has been known as a quarterback whisperer when it comes to the college game. Their first true road game isn't until October 16th against Missouri. Even though they do play Colorado and Denver, I don't expect that to be a huge deal unless he's just not prepared to play at that altitude. They get Alabama at home, which is a huge win, and then 2 home and 2 road games in November, which is a pretty decent schedule for the Aggies. What are your guys' thoughts on over under 9.5 there for Texas A&M?
I mean, they have the best running back in the SEC, and in my opinion, the second best running back in the entire NCAA, and Isaiah Spiller. So I like this. I mean, you're having a fairly easy Kent State, Colorado, New Mexico starting. Then you got Arkansas, Mississippi State. Only Bama is a guaranteed loss, in my opinion. I think they could beat every other team on the schedule and go 11-1. I think, yes, they have potential to drop one, maybe LSU, maybe Auburn, maybe Missouri, maybe whatever. But I'm going with they're going to get at least 10 wins. I think they can go 11-1. I like the Aggies this year, and I like Jimbo Fisher.
100% agree, Ethan. I got the over as well. They have for sure one guaranteed loss, and that's to Bama. Other than that, every other game is fairly winnable. As much as I want to say LSU going to be A&M, no, that's not going to happen. It's a very different LSU team than in years past. I feel like Jimbo Fisher hasn't prepared, and you also have to look at where the college AP has them ranked before the season even starts. They're right there at number 6. So they're in a comfortable position to get in the top 4. That's why it's very important with how the college AP ranks these teams to start the season. Because I mean, you have Georgia who started at number 5, which most likely means that's basically the committee saying, "Hey Georgia, if you got a loss and your only loss is to Bama, we'll sneak you in at number 4 because we got you at 5 beforehand." That could be very well the same case with A&M. They got A&M ranked at number 6. What the committee, in my opinion, is telling A&M is basically saying, "Hey, we know that you're going to have one loss this season to Bama, but if that's the only loss that you got, that number 4 seed is right there. We could slide you in at number 4, and people aren't going to have a problem because it's A&M. We don't got no problems." So for Jimbo Fisher and A&M, that's going to be your pressure. And also, I want to see how A&M plays against Alabama, because we've seen two sides. We've seen them play close to Alabama, and then we've seen them get absolutely obliterated by Alabama. There's no in between. So I'm very much looking forward. Now, what's good about this game is it's at College Station. It's at A&M. That's going to be the only advantage they got.
It's going to be rocking.
And if there's one thing that's concerned for A&M,
they're going to be coming in there 5-0.
Yeah, they're going to be coming in there red hot. They're probably going to both be top 5 at that time. I wouldn't be shocked if A&M moves up to Georgia's number 5, because Georgia has to play Clemson week 1. They're most likely going to lose, most likely going to take a slight dip. A&M will probably take them at number 5. That sort of ordeal. But, it's going to be a good competitive matchup. And for A&M, if I were Jimbo Fisher and the boys, obviously you have to have the mindset of going in to win the game. But you also have to look at it and say, keep it close. If they could keep it 1-score game or even 10 points, the committee is going to look at that and say, hey, you know what? You may have lost to Bama, but it was only a 7 to 10-point loss. We could sneak you in at number 4 just because you kept it close to Bama. Why not have you guys rematch in the semis and go from there? But if you get blown out again, if you lose by like 17, 20 points, that's not going to be a good loss. Yes, it is to top-ranked Alabama, but 17, 20 points, I don't know. I don't think the committee wants to see that in the semifinals, because we've seen almost every year since the college football playoff has been inputted, there's always one semifinal game that's good, and one that's just a flat-out embarrassment. Why are they even here? You could pick it out every year. Oregon against Florida State the first year, complete, utter blowout. Alabama versus Washington. Alabama versus Michigan State, utter, complete blowouts. Even Bama, when they got revenge against Clemson, it was a blowout. LSU against Oklahoma, that was a blowout. Alabama versus Notre Dame, that one was a blowout. Every year the college football has been inputted, you always have the one blowout. And if you're A&M, you cannot afford to be blown out against Alabama because the committee is going to look at that and say, we don't want to have a blowout game in the semifinals. We don't want to have a national championship game set in stone at halftime. Because if we're being honest, that's how it's been pretty much the entire college football playoff. Every year, we think it's going to be good. We think it's going to be a good matchup to go in. But then when it's at halftime, you're just like, well, looks like this team's going to the national championship to versus set other team. So that's the only thing I have to say for A&M. You could guarantee them to hit the over, like Charles Barkley says, guarantee on the over. But for A&M against Bama, you better play your best performance of the season. I don't care if you lose to Bama. We can understand that. But don't lose to Alabama by 17, 20 points. Lose to them instead by a field goal or 5 points or 7 points. Because then the committee is going to look at that and say, you know what? You may have not have won your conference, but your only loss was to Alabama and 7 points. Why not slide you in at number 4, and why not get that rematch?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to ultimately for Texas A&M is going to be the play of their quarterback and the offensive line. They only return one starter on the offensive line. 4 of those they're going to have to replace. Not a lot of continuity there for them. And then the quarterback position, who's going to be throwing the ball for them? Mon's not there anymore. So you can't rely on the veteran leadership of that. So you're going to have to kind of build on that. And I did say before this that Jimbo Fisher is the quarterback whisperer and shouldn't have a problem doing it, but it's still a tall task. It's not an easy thing to replace him. I mean, you saw him do it with Jameis Winston and then later on with DeAndre Francois when he was at Florida State. Let's see if one of these guys is able to do the same thing there with Jimbo that he was able to do when he was at Florida State. And that's going to be the biggest question mark. Other than that, I think the schedule lines up perfectly for them to just take one loss and then run the rest of the schedule. I like the over 9.5. I think that's fairly simple to go ahead and hit for them. But it's going to come down to quarterback play, because if the quarterback play is not there and not ready for big moments in SEC games, then it can go downhill really fast. That pressure can get to you. It's a lot more pressure than playing in the ACC. You got to have this guy ready to go, game in, game out. Doesn't matter who your opponent is. They're still SEC caliber players. Most of these guys, a lot of these guys go into the NFL, and it's a proven fact based off of statistics. That's just how it is. You're going to be going up against the top of the top. And that's something that Jimbo's going to have to get these quarterbacks ready for. I have a lot of utmost respect and belief that Jimbo can get that done and have his quarterback ready to go. There's going to be mistakes made early, but that's why the schedule is set up for them to make those mistakes early on against opponents that they should still be able to win against with, mistakes being made by the quarterback. To be able to get in there at 5-0 and face an Alabama team, and now your guy's ready to go, has the utmost confidence in himself going 5-0, has already made mistakes, learned from them, and now has Jimbo's utmost confidence in them as well. So I think they might have a chance to beat Alabama. Do I think they do? Probably not, but you're right, Matt. If they keep it close against Alabama, they'll be that 4th team, ultimately, even if they don't make the SEC championship game. But think about this. What if Alabama falls at some year? What if Bryce Young gets hurt? What happens then? What happens if Alabama drops 2 and the only loss for Texas A&M is against Alabama, and then Texas A&M gets in the conference championship game and loses? Then what the hell are you going to do? It's going to be a complete.
Here's one thing I will say to that. If A&M gets lucky, Bama loses 2 games, but A&M blows it, you won't see an SEC team in the top 4. I'm sorry. I'm in the mindset of
which would be the first time.
If you got 2 losses, I don't think you should be anywhere near the top 4, regardless of what team you are. Because you look at top 4, in my opinion, is pretty much slated for undefeated conference champions and maybe make a case for a 1-loss team, but that was because you lost in that championship game to said team. That's, in my opinion, what the top 4 is all about. If there's a team from the SEC that has 2 losses and they win the championship game, I'm sorry, you're not in the top 4. Yeah, you're SEC, but you're not top 4. You're New Year's 6. You're number 5, number 6. You're not top 4. Because I mean, regardless, like if it's a top 4 squad, I think those are just reserved for conference champions and maybe a one-loss team like a Georgia or A&M. That's about it. Just because the conference is so good. Now, maybe you can make a case for Oklahoma, but I just look at Big 12 is not really a good conference. It's pretty weak. If we're being honest here, the Big 12 only consists of Iowa State, Oklahoma, Texas, and maybe Oklahoma State, and that's about it. 4 teams in the Big 12. SEC, you got a whole lot of cases. ACC, you can make a case. Clemson, North Carolina, maybe sleeper FSU, maybe, but for the most part, ACC, it's pretty much Clemson or bust for the top 4 side of things.
But
then
it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the SEC West. Obviously, your 2 juggernauts there are Alabama and Texas A&M. But with that being said, that has been our SEC preview as well as our win totals for every single SEC team. Went a little long here for you guys, but not a big worry. We're still finishing up at a reasonable time. We thank you guys for joining in. If you've been watching us, you've been seeing the ticker go down at the bottom. Be sure to check out every single one of our sponsors, whether that's heading over to our USN shop at teespring.com/stores/unwrap to get all of your unwrapped sports merchandise and apparel. If you're a gambling person, head over to mybookie.ag. Use code USN100 for double your first deposit. Put in $50, get $50 in free play from MyBookie. And also head over to rxhemp.com and use code rxhemp-USN for 10% off every single one of your purchase, guys. It's all natural CBD pain relief cream, hot and cold remedy. It's good stuff. I use it all the time, so it's amazing stuff, guys. Head over there. Check out all of our sponsors as well. And from there, guys, I just want to go ahead and give off a quick sign-off for myself, and then I'll send it over to Ethan and let him sign off for you guys as well. You guys can follow me at CHS Knoll right there next to my name on Twitter. Also follow Saturday Standouts on Twitter as well. Just look up Saturday Standouts. You'll be able to find us. Trying to revamp that, trying to get back into the social media game, especially on Twitter. So you guys keep an eye out for that coming up soon. Go check out all of our recently uploaded podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast at, you can find us. So go check us out on that if you're unable to catch the live stream. With that, Ethan, anything else you got to say? Give any shout outs, give yourself a nice little plug here or there if you need to.
Yep. Follow me, like it says on the screen, at Ethan_Carboni on Twitter. I always tweet out anytime I'm on a new episode of one of my 3 shows. Sending it over to Matt.
All right. Twitter handle down below at Matt_Skura. Instagram at Matt_Skura20. Check out my sports podcast. Me and our great friend Caleb Conant do called MCS Real Sports Podcast. Talk all things sports related. You name it. It's available everywhere. There's a link tree in both my Instagram and Twitter bios, which gives you access to where the podcast is available, which is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Like Caleb mentioned, wherever you get your podcasts, it's there. You just have to search up MCS Real Sports Podcast. As always, Caleb and Ethan, is a pleasure to be on Saturday Night Standouts with college football around the corner. I'm pumped to see the crowds at college football, the tailgates, all the crazy shenanigans that are about to go down. It's going to be excited to see who the top 4 teams will be by season's end.
Absolutely. It's gonna be a thrill. Fans back in stadium, 100% capacity in most areas. So that's gonna be exciting to see. Respect big crowds, loud crowds, an exciting college football season. I know Ethan's pumped. I know Matt's pumped. I'm pumped myself. We're just a little over a week away from these games being underway, guys. Super excited about it. With that being said, Matt, thank you for coming on. As always, we always appreciate your insight, especially when it comes to not only college football, but pro football as well, because you got tons of insight on that. So thank you, Matt. And then thank you, Ethan, for always being my co-host. And with that being said, guys, this has been another episode of Saturday Standouts.